Hello, friends of the European spirit. Now, you may have heard that Nietzsche said in his posthumously published notes that nihilism is the future of Europe for the next 200 years, so we should be just in the middle of it, or maybe perhaps only 50 years away from nihilism coming to an end. Now, the question, though, is, does Nietzsche anywhere really envision or imagine what this epoch of ours looks like? Or does he only, in a sense, imagine or envision, think towards a moment where nihilism may have ended? He does talk, of course, about the great devaluation of all highest values and the necessity to transvalue all values in order to bring about a new epoch, and also to be a strong nihilist, in a sense, to be able to withstand nihilism. But in fact, he does really actually envision the future in a passage, also again published posthumously. And I think more recently, most, if not all, of Nietzsche's notes, which you can see here, this is the Gesamtausgabe, die kritische Studienausgabe, more than half of these books here are actually just his notes. And so Nietzsche, I think in the late 1880s, does envision the future, and he explicitly refers to it as the uncanny wheelwork, or rather as the maybe even eerie wheelwork, where the human being ein ungeheures Räderwerk, where the human being is reduced to but a cog or a wheel. And Nietzsche warns, or maybe doesn't even warn, but just soberly foresees this future and refers to it as inevitable. And also what's inevitable is then the reduction of man to a cog, and that there could be a sort of standstill in the, I think he says, in the niveau of man, or in the level of man, that we are so reduced to but a wheel. And of course you could tie this to sort of the critiques of capitalism and bullshit jobs, etc. All of this, of course, is just derivative in a sense to what Nietzsche and others foresaw in the 19th century for what is on the horizon. But what Nietzsche then refers to here also on a grander scale is that the earth is going to be transformed. And again, inevitably so. That what is in stock for us, as he says, inevitably, is die unvermeidlich bevorstehende Wirtschaftsgesamtverwaltung der Erde. The total economic management of the earth, which is inevitably in store for us. And that, I think, is that history of nihilism of the next 200 years through which we are living. Is this stance in the niveau of man, the reduction of man to a wheel, the last man to be content with that reduction, and the impossibility, in a sense, of the incapacity to birth a new epoch, to go beyond ourselves. And once we speak of the notion of beyond, which doesn't imply, by the way, a beyond world, but to go beyond the current epoch, it means something different than going to another, going to a beyond world, obviously. But what Nietzsche refers to, then here also in this passage in the posthumously published notes, is the Übermensch. The Superman, as the early translation goes, or the more recent translation, I think, is Overman, which is to imply that the Übermensch is the one who goes over and beyond the current epoch, the current state of things, rather than being a Superman who stands atop of other human beings. And by the way, the word übermenschlich, superhuman or overhuman, or beyond human is used, for example, by Goethe. Actually, the earth spirit also refers to Faust as an Übermensch. But Übermenschlich can often mean something that is too difficult for man, or too hard for man to attain. So it has these two connotations. On the one hand, to go over and beyond what could actually be reasonably be required of man, or be demanded of him, or even what is even possible. So it's almost a demand. Also, it can mean a demand that is for man impossible to fulfill. So the Übermensch is, in a sense, then no longer man, but and there are, of course, sort of romantic notions attached to the Übermensch, and you can see this bubbling up again and again. But I think, and I've talked about this publicly already, that if we want to get to what the Übermensch ultimately amounts to for Nietzsche himself, we actually find this full notion in this posthumously published note, where he says that the Übermensch is, he doesn't say he's a criminal, but how he describes the Übermensch is ultimately quite similar to what a criminal would be. Someone who stands atop the wheelwork and who justifies the uncanny wheelwork just by existing. So the Übermensch is ultimately the justification of the uncanny wheelwork, serves as its justification, and again, the Übermensch is then also I would say, dependent upon the uncanny wheelwork. So it's quite a bleak vision that Nietzsche has. So because here the Übermensch quite obviously is not actually going over and beyond anything anymore, but stands atop this ultimate reduction of man, which is required, as he says, because this is how Nietzsche thinks, as justification for existence. So the striking thing is that Nietzsche always looks for a justification or an affirmation of existence, which one could point out is in fact not an acceptance of nihilism. Is in fact he's still searching for some sort of justification and affirmation, where perhaps what would be required is rather a full-fledged acceptance of the negativity of existence and of being, and also of the if we speak of inevitability, of the inevitability of confusion in this age, and no need for justification in a sense, no need for, and that's really a sense of a higher being that justifies the lower states of existence, which is what this seems to amount to. So I think with this passage, all romantic notions go out the window. I go into this more deeply, Nietzsche's notion of nihilism, where he thinks it comes from, how it relates to Christianity, etc. In many other lectures here on this channel, also life affirmation, etc. And the eternal recurrence of the same, how all this plays in. And also, of course, in my course on Nietzsche, which you can sign up by following the link in the description of this video. There are 7 lectures dedicated to Nietzsche, specifically on really nihilism and overcoming nihilism, and what Nietzsche sees as possible, but also where we need to go over and beyond Nietzsche, as it were. Thank you.